Look at him, can't even hold his drink without shaking. No wonder she found someone better. The words cracked across the crowded banquet hall like a whip, and the laughter that followed stabbed straight through me. Glasses clinked, silverware scraped against plates, a few phones angled discreetly to capture my humiliation. At the head table, under the chandelier's white glare, my wife, Lauren, tried to mask her smirk behind the rim of her champagne flute. My boss, Greg Wallace, sat beside her, grinning with the kind of smugness you only earn when you know you've taken something that can't be returned. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 43 years old, from Dayton, Ohio, and if I've learned anything from this world, it's that appearances are a currency. And tonight, stripped of mine, I stood broke in front of everyone. But here's the thing nobody in that room knew, not Lauren, not Greg, not even the so-called friends who turned away rather than meet my eyes. I had an edge, a secret, and I've been sharpening it quietly for years. The banquet was supposed to be mine. My 15 years at the firm had finally built to this night. A leadership award, recognition for keeping our biggest accounts steady, while Greg spent more time golfing than managing. The plaque should have had my name etched on it. Instead, Greg announced to the entire floor that I had fallen short, and then, like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, revealed a new partnership initiative, led by Lauren. My wife my anchor paraded as the firm's fresh face of innovation, smiling with teeth I once thought were mine to protect. A single object on the table in front of me kept drawing my eyes, the slice of pecan pie untouched on my dessert plate. Stupid maybe, but pecan pie had always been my comfort food, my mother's tradition at every Thanksgiving. Sweet, dense, reliable. Tonight, it looked like a cruel reminder how something meant to bring family together could sour in your mouth when trust was gone. I clenched my fork hard enough the metal bent, and I wondered if anyone else could hear the pulse hammering in my temples. Greg raised his glass. To Lauren proof that sometimes the brightest stars aren't the ones we expect. More laughter. Chairs scraped as everyone stood to toast. I stayed seated, my jaw tight. Across the room, a junior associate, Ethan, met my eyes with pity. That stung worse than the jeering. Pity is humiliation's cousin, it lingers longer. I could have walked out right then, left the tuxedo rental behind, let them think they'd broken me. But walking away would mean surrender, and I don't surrender. Not when my father worked himself to death on the assembly line to teach me never to. Not when my daughter, Emily, sat just 3 tables away, watching the wreck of her father unravel under golden lights. She was 19, home from college, proud to see me honored tonight. Her wide eyes darted between Lauren and Greg, confusion burning into betrayal. I couldn't let that image calcify in her memory, so I stayed. I smiled a thin razor smile and raised my own glass. My hand didn't shake this time. My voice, when it cut through the noise, was calm enough to draw attention. To secrets, I said. Because sooner or later, they always come out. Lauren's smirk faltered. Greg's brow furrowed. Phones went up again, capturing my toast, but I didn't care. I wanted them to record it. I wanted it immortalized. The next minutes passed in a blur of hollow speeches and forced applause, but my mind was sharpening itself into a weapon. I cataloged every laugh, every sideways glance, every handshake Lauren accepted, as if she hadn't gutted me in public. The humiliation wasn't the end, it was fuel. When the program wrapped and people began filing out, Greg clapped me on the shoulder with mock sympathy. Tough night, Danny, but hey, maybe you'll get next year. His cologne reeked of power he hadn't earned. I leaned close enough he had to hear me over the chatter. Enjoy your spotlight, Greg. Just remember, it doesn't last forever. He smirked like a man who thought he owned the board. But he didn't know what pieces I'd been keeping off it. I walked Emily to the parking lot, the cold January air biting into our lungs. She looked up at me with tears glinting under the streetlight. Dad, did Mom really? She couldn't finish. I pulled her close. Some things you don't need to ask twice. Just trust me. This isn't the end. And in that moment, I meant every word. Before we get deeper into this story, make sure you're subscribed and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. The night drove me back to our house empty. Lauren staying late with Greg and the others. I sat alone in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed loud against the silence. I opened the cabinet and pulled out the old shoebox where I kept documents, flash drives, and one little envelope marked private. Lauren never knew about it. Neither did Greg. It was my insurance policy, my ace in the hole. I didn't open it yet. Timing is everything in war, and this was war now. Instead, I scribbled notes in my worn leather planner, the one colleagues mocked me for using instead of an app. Dates, meetings, vulnerabilities. Strategy born of humiliation. If life had just rewritten my role from celebrated employee to betrayed husband, then I'd flip the script again, one careful move at a time. Emily's door creaked open upstairs. Her muffled sobs cut through me sharper than anything Greg had said. That's when I knew revenge wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her seeing that her father didn't break when pushed to the edge. I whispered into the silence, "Pain is only wasted if you don't turn it into purpose." And with that, I began plotting the kind of retribution that doesn't come with fists or shouting matches, but with precision, patience, and inevitability. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan slicing the dark into slow rotations, my planner open on my chest, pen still in my hand. Every creak of the house felt like an accusation, every memory of Lauren's laugh at that banquet slicing deeper than the one before. By dawn, the plan in my head wasn't a blur anymore, it was sharp enough to cut. At work the next morning, I walked into the office carrying coffee, like it was any other Tuesday. People glanced up, then quickly backed down at their screens, afraid eye contact might brand them guilty of watching me fall. Lauren wasn't at her desk yet, but Greg was holding court in his glass office, a tie pin gleaming on his chest. I passed by and he waved at me like a man greeting a harmless neighbor. I smiled back. Harmless was exactly what I wanted him to think. The first step wasn't confrontation, it was collection. I logged into my workstation, opened the firm's shared drive, and scrolled through project folders. Years of late nights had left me with something Greg never understood. Fingerprints on everything. Emails he hadn't read, reports he hadn't written, approvals he'd signed blind. I downloaded quietly, transferred files to my encrypted flash drive, and slid it into the inner pocket of my blazer. Lauren breezed in around 10, heels clicking like she was walking a runway. She wore the red coat I'd bought her last Christmas. She didn't even glance at me as she dropped her purse, her phone already pressed to her ear. I didn't need to hear the words. I saw it in her shoulders, the intimacy of someone too comfortable with the man on the other end. My fingers curled tight around the armrest of my chair, but I forced them to relax. Anger without control is noise. Anger with control is strategy. At lunch, I sat alone in the corner booth of the diner across the street. Same place I'd been eating for years, burnt coffee, greasy burgers, the smell of bacon clinging to my clothes. That booth had seen my promotions, my breakdowns, my deadlines. Now it became my war room. I flipped open my planner and wrote a single phrase at the top of the page. Turn their weapons on them. The waitress, an older woman named Carol, who always called me Hun, poured my refill and gave me a look. "You all right today, Danny? You look like you're planning a heist." I smiled, thin but real, something like that. She chuckled, shaking her head. "Just don't get caught." By the time I walked back across the street, Greg was standing outside smoking, the winter wind whipping smoke across his smug face. He flicked ash onto the sidewalk and nodded. "Rough night last night, huh? No hard feelings, right?" I stepped closer, just enough that his eyes flickered. "Greg, the thing about hard feelings is they don't go away just because someone pretends they should." His smile faltered. Just for a second, that was enough to keep me warm. The days blurred, each one another brick in the trap I was building. I gathered files, copied contracts, printed receipts. Lauren stayed later and later at strategy meetings, and every time she came home, her perfume carried the faint trace of Greg's cologne. Emily avoided her, barely speaking, her disappointment hanging like smoke in the house. I became quieter around Lauren, polite to the point of cruelty. Silence is its own kind of violence, and she didn't know how to answer it. One Friday night, while she showered, I scrolled through her phone. It wasn't even locked. Arrogance will always be a traitor's downfall. The messages were worse than I expected. Not just business talk disguised as flirtation, but photos, confessions, timelines. She called him my real partner. She laughed about me. She said I was stuck in the past with my pecan pie traditions. That one hit like a hammer. My mother's table, my family's legacy, reduced to a punchline. I took screenshots. Every word, every picture, saved to the encrypted folder on my laptop. My hands didn't shake as I organized them. In fact, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. Revenge doesn't live in chaos, it breathes in order. Saturday, Emily caught me at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. She frowned. "Dad, what are you doing?" I closed the folder but didn't lie. Making sure the truth gets seen. Her eyes searched mine. She was smart, too smart not to piece it together. "If you go after them, you can't half do it, you know that, right?" I nodded. "Half measures are for men who don't mind being stepped on." She studied me, then finally whispered, "Then don't get stepped on again." Her faith became my second weapon. The next week brought Greg's so-called innovation rollout. A grand meeting in the firm's atrium, screens lit with Lauren's smiling face beside his. I stood in the back, invisible, recording every second on my phone. They'd pitched ideas I'd written, strategies I'd tested, data I'd built. And they took credit like they'd carried the weight themselves. When the applause ended, I didn't clap. I just slipped out into the cold and sent an anonymous email to a journalist I knew, from a college buddy, a reporter who loved nothing more than corporate hypocrisy. Attached were files, screenshots, contracts with Greg's untouched fingerprints. Enough to raise questions, not enough to trace back to me. Not yet. 2 nights later, the story hit a mid-tier business blog. Wallace and Hayes accused of credit theft in innovation rollout. The firm buzzed with whispers. Greg barked denials. Lauren paced like a caged animal. My silence made me untouchable. That night at home, Lauren cornered me in the kitchen. "Did you do this?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. I sipped coffee, the bitterness grounding me. "Do what?" Her eyes burned. "Don't play dumb, Daniel. Someone's trying to ruin us." I leaned in, close enough to see the fear in her pupils. "Maybe you should ask yourself why you feel like you've got something to be ruined." She slapped the counter hard enough the salt shaker tipped. But she didn't deny it, and that silence was louder than any confession. I walked away before she could spit another word. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in shouting, it's in leaving them to choke on their own guilt. That night, lying awake again, I repeated one line in my head. Betrayal isn't a knife in the back. It's a mirror showing who they've been all along. And with every reflection, I tightened the noose one knot closer. By the time February thawed the ice off the sidewalks, the office had turned into a hive of paranoia. Greg's bark grew sharper, Lauren's smile more brittle, and whispers slithered through cubicles like smoke. People didn't know the source of the leak, but they knew rot when they smelled it. I watched from my desk, invisible, feeding on their unease. The more they squirmed, the clearer my path became. The second wave of exposure came through a forum post anonymous, timed perfectly at the start of Monday's meeting. A thread with side-by-side screenshots. Greg's presentation slides next to an old client report with my watermark still faintly in the corner. Not enough to burn the house down, but enough to make smoke pour out the windows. Phones buzzed around the table, faces bent low to read, and I didn't have to check mine to know Emily had forwarded the link to me with nothing but a fire emoji. Greg slammed his fist on the table. "This is sabotage. Someone's out to gut us." Lauren shifted in her seat, her eyes flicking to me for just half a second before darting away. That half second was all I needed. Fear always shows in the eyes first. I kept my expression neutral, scribbling notes as if the world outside the conference room didn't exist. Inside, my pulse was steady, measured. The shoebox at home still sat unopened, waiting for its moment, but every little crack I forced in their facade brought me closer. That night, when I drove home, the headlights of trucks washed over me on the highway. I gripped the wheel harder, the hum of tires on asphalt steady like a drumbeat. My father used to say long roads were where truth caught up with you. And he was right, because when I pulled into the driveway, Lauren was waiting on the porch, arms folded tight, a glass of wine dangling like a weapon. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" She hissed as soon as I stepped out of the car. "Enjoying what?" "Don't play games with me, Daniel. You think I don't notice?" Every time something new leaks, you get quieter. That smug little calm. I climbed the steps slowly, close enough for her perfume to crawl under my skin. "Funny thing about calm," I said. "It doesn't come from innocence. It comes from knowing the storm isn't aimed at you." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak again. And in that silence, I saw the truth she'd never admit. She was scared. Inside, Emily sat on the couch, headphones on, laptop open. She glanced up, caught the tension, and quickly returned to typing. A moment later, my phone buzzed, her text flashing across the screen. "Got another one. Check your email." I opened it in my study. Attached was a forwarded thread, Photos of Greg and Lauren at a hotel bar, time-stamped just last week, clearly too close for business partners. Whoever had snapped them had done me a favor. I saved every image to my drive, then printed 2 copies, sliding them into a plain envelope. The next morning, I left one envelope tucked into Greg's office chair before he arrived. No note, no signature. Just the photos. When he saw them, his face drained white, and for once his booming voice faltered. He glanced at me across the room, suspicion dripping from his eyes. But suspicion without proof is just paranoia, and paranoia destroys faster than accusation. Lauren, meanwhile, grew colder. She cooked less, spoke less, slept facing the wall. The distance was its own confession, one she didn't realize Emily absorbed every night. And Emily's silence toward her mother sharpened into a blade of its own. The firm's quarterly board review arrived in March. Greg strutted in with Lauren shadowing him, their matching smiles brittle as porcelain. I waited until halfway through his pitch until the exact moment he bragged about unmatched transparency. Then I struck. An anonymous email blasted the board members mid-meeting. A single attachment, a recording. Greg's voice, laughing with Lauren in a hotel room, mocking clients by name, bragging about cutting corners. It wasn't graphic, but it didn't need to be. It was damning enough. The silence that followed was thicker than smoke. Board members shifted uncomfortably, phones buzzing with the file, eyes narrowing at Greg. He stumbled, coughed, then tried to laugh it off as taken out of context. But context doesn't matter when the knife is already in. I kept my head down, jotting notes, invisible again. My advantage was always the same. Let them implode under the weight of their own arrogance. That night, I finally opened the shoebox. Inside were documents I'd collected over years, contracts with small errors Greg ignored, invoices double-charged, emails with timestamps proving negligence. But the real jewel sat in that small envelope marked private, a signed clause buried deep in the partnership agreement. One sentence overlooked by every lawyer Greg ever bragged about hiring. It stated that if misconduct was proven under his leadership, authority shifted automatically to the longest-tenured partner still active. That partner was me. I held the paper under the lamp, the words glowing like scripture. A single overlooked detail that was the lever I'd used to break the machine. The next morning, I tucked the clause into my planner, the same planner everyone mocked. The same planner Lauren once called your little security blanket. And I carried it into the office like a priest with a holy relic. Greg stormed past me at noon, red-faced, sweating, snapping at assistants. Lauren trailed behind him, lips tight, eyes darting. They didn't know yet. Not fully, but they would. I scheduled a meeting with the board for the following week. When the assistant asked for the agenda, I only smiled and said, procedure. Because that's the thing about rules, people forget them until they cut like knives. Emily came into the study that night while I was organizing the file. She sat across from me, chin propped on her fist. You're scaring Mom. She should be scared. You're not doing this just for you anymore, are you? I looked at her, the one person whose opinion still mattered, and shook my head. No, I'm doing it so you never think betrayal is stronger than truth. Her eyes softened, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during late-night basketball games on TV. She whispered, then finish it. So I sharpened the final blade. And as I sealed copies of the contract clause into envelopes for each board member, my mind whispered one truth over and over. Power doesn't corrupt it, only shows who was already rotten. The trap was ready, the noose drawn tight. All that remained was the drop. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, sunlight bleeding through the tall windows, dust motes drifting like ash in the air. 12 men and women in suits sat in polished chairs, their folders lined neatly in front of them. Greg entered first, shoulders square, forcing bravado he didn't own anymore. Lauren followed, her red coat sharp against the gray room, eyes flicking to me as if she could still gauge what cards I held. She had no idea the game was already over. I'd placed my planner on the table, opened it with deliberate calm, and slid the copied clause across the polished wood. Section 14, subsection C, I said. Automatic transfer of authority in the event of misconduct. Greg's laugh cracked, high and brittle. This is a stunt, Danny. Nobody here takes that old clause seriously. The chairman adjusted his glasses, scanning the paper. Actually, Greg, this is binding. He tapped the line with his finger. And with the recording circulating online, the board has no choice but to consider misconduct proven. The silence that followed was a grave being filled. Greg's face turned crimson, sweat shining on his forehead. Lauren leaned forward, her voice slicing through the room. "You can't do this. You don't know what you're doing." I cut her off with a look colder than the glass between us. "You chose him. You laughed while he mocked me. Now watch him choke on the rules he ignored." Gasps rippled. Phones buzzed as members forwarded each other the clause. Greg stammered, cursed, then turned to Lauren as if she might save him. But she stayed silent. Self-preservation always trumps loyalty, and in that moment she proved her betrayal wasn't limited to me. She abandoned him too. I should have felt triumph. Instead, all I felt was the weight of inevitability pressing into my chest. Revenge isn't sweet, it's heavy, but I wasn't finished yet. When the meeting adjourned, the board stripped Greg of authority effective immediately. Papers were signed, contracts invoked. By technicality, by procedure, the company he thought he owned slipped like sand through his fingers into mine. Lauren cornered me afterward in the hallway, her face pale, her lipstick smudged. "Daniel, listen, we can fix this. You've proven your point, but don't burn it all down. Think about Emily. Think about us." I stared at her, at the woman who once promised forever and chose convenience instead. My voice was flat. "There is no us. And Emily already knows the truth. You showed her yourself." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Her hand froze mid-air, trembling, before falling uselessly to her side. And for the first time I saw her as she really was, not powerful, not untouchable, just small. The fall came faster than even I expected. Within a week, news outlets picked up the story of Greg's misconduct, the leaked recordings, the procedural clause that toppled him. The firm's name trended on Twitter. Screenshots of Lauren and Greg in the hotel bar went viral. Their betrayal, their smug laughter, immortalized for strangers to consume like blood in the water. I didn't leak the final piece until Friday night, the pecan pie. I uploaded a clip to every platform, cut from the banquet recording Greg's mocking toast, Lauren's smirk, the untouched slice of pecan pie in front of me. And then my voice, calm and steady, raising a glass to secrets, because sooner or later they always come out. The video spread like wildfire, rebranded into memes, reaction edits, TikToks with millions of views. That stupid slice of pie became the symbol of poetic justice. Hashtags bloomed. Hashtag pecan pie justice. Hashtag secrets always come out. Greg tried to sue. Lauren tried to apologize. But screenshots don't lie, recordings don't vanish, and tradition, my mother's pecan pie, turned into the blade they cut themselves on. Emily watched it unfold beside me on the couch, her hand gripping mine as the likes and comments rolled in. "Dad," she whispered, "you did it." I shook my head slowly. "No, they did it to themselves. I just showed the world." She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since that night under the chandeliers, I breathed without fire in my chest. Greg's downfall was final. The board voted to expel him permanently, his severance stripped by the very clause he ignored. His empire gone, his reputation shattered, his name spit out in jokes on late-night TV. Lauren's was quieter but no less brutal, ostracized. Her social circle evaporated, whispers following her into every room she entered. The woman who mocked my traditions became the punchline herself, her face glued to the pecan pie meme. And me? I sat in the office Greg once owned, staring at the skyline, planner open on the desk. Victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like scar tissue. The firm was mine now, but so was the silence of nights spent wondering how love rots, how loyalty bends. Emily walked in, setting a cup of diner coffee in front of me, steam curling into the air. "You're still you," she said softly. "Don't forget that." I nodded, the bitter coffee grounding me again, and I knew she was right. I wasn't the man they humiliated anymore, but I wasn't untouched either. I closed the planner, leaned back, and let the lesson settle like dust after a storm. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't destroy you. It just shows you who deserves to be destroyed. And once you see it, you never forget. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us share more true stories like this.